everybody here is here because they're interested in ideas. And I'm sure most of you, all of you, have actually had an idea. That wasn't supposed to be a joke. I'll get to that in a second when we talk about my ideas. So you have an idea. You actually think it's going to solve a significant problem. You think it is an idea that perhaps you could even push along. You think it's an idea that could be successful, make you successful, and maybe even wealthy. But soon after thinking of these ideas, it occurs to you that fear sets in. There are all sorts of challenges. Can you really do it? Do you really have the resources that are going to push that idea forward? Is it something that somebody else has already thought of before and is already doing? These are things that stand in the way of getting your idea out there, and a lot of those things are quite legitimate ones. Now, a few years ago, and this is where we come to talk about my idea, I should warn you, it's not going to be one of these ideas that is of TED significance of some of the ones we've already heard today. But I will claim it to be of widespread significance, as you'll see in a second. My aha moment came when I saw Steve Jobs in 2008 on a web video introduce what was to become the App Store for the iPhone. They were going to introduce an iPhone with applications on it, and the iPhone was going to have GPS. And I thought to myself, this thing's going to have GPS and an internet connection. What would I want to see on that iPhone? What I'd want to see is this. What this is a search for the nearest restroom. That's what I wanted. That was the first thing that popped to my mind. And I thought this was a fairly clear idea. It's a want that was very well defined. And maybe it was the sort of idea that I could push forward. And so that's what I thought about doing. Now, unlike the guy in this Onion Talks video who came up with an idea and then said, TED audience and the rest of the world, you can now do it. I've done the hard work. I thought maybe I could actually, in contrast to my usual reputation as a professor, actually see if I could push something forward in the economy. And I gathered MBA students together. It wasn't very hard to sell them on this. I wasn't someone who could do any coding or anything like that, but I could gather those resources together and we could push ahead with this idea. Now, as we came to explore it, the first problem that presented itself was, where are the public toilets? Where are they? I mean, you know from your things, but how would you get the data for an app to locate accurately public toilets? Well, as it turned out, we had a gift. A few years earlier, I was in Australia, and which is where I was from, except for coming here these last 2 years. They had a government program called the National Continence Management Strategy. And one of the recommendations of the National Continence Management Strategy was to set up the National Public Toilet Map. And here it is. What you do is, you go to this web page and you enter the address you want to go into. You put in what sort of toilet you're after. Look at any characteristic you could think of. And when you pressed click on that, voila, you had a map of the toilets where you wanted to go. Now, that's where the data was. The data had already been collected. Now, the problem with this, of course, this was pre-smartphones, no one had occurred to it. You could actually call up this on a iPhone at the time, and it would turn up, because it was rendered that way, into a little screen you could never really look at. It was almost impossible to use, and also you had to enter the address. So you had to know where you were to find the nearest toilet, which was not quite the vision for relief I had in mind. Nonetheless, because the data was there, we contacted the National Continence Management Strategy and asked whether we could license the data to build this app. I had some visions on how we were going to be able to fund that. I thought I've written a book on parenting. I might be able to put the two things together somehow. Didn't really matter. But we inquired, and I don't want to go into cut a long story short, is basically they said no, which is a whole story in of itself. They refused to give us the data for this. Now, that pretty much was the end of it for us, because we had no other way. I'm an economist, not a cartographer. We weren't going to find the data anywhere. So we gave up on that idea, let it go to rest. Somebody else would do this. And I did what I could do, being an academic. I wrote an opinion piece about this. And I complained that the government wasn't telling us where the toilets were. And what are you going to do? They are left with this strategy that currently envisaged somebody with continence issues worried about where they're going to head out and planning their day so that they have less anxiety. Surely we could do better. And surely this is not just a toilet problem, but a problem with lots of data. And government data should be put out there so that people could freely build apps and take into account this new burgeoning industry. Now, took 2 years. The Australian government did do that. They held a review. Because of my opinion piece, toilets were front and centre. And the National Public Toilet Map was released and it was put out there, and we were successful in that. Australia is the only place, though, you can find an accurate toilet map. I should just say, and it's not because this is an unobvious idea. Everybody's had this idea. Larry David devoted almost an entire season of Curb Your Enthusiasm to someone having this idea and bringing it to market. So it's not like it was great, and it's not rocket science, that's for sure. There was an app called Sit or Squat that was launched very soon after in the United States. That's not the most appealing name, but it accurately collected what that app was trying to do, which was not only find out where the toilets were, but also allow consumers to rate them, including with pictures. Again, you can't fault them for usefulness. But the problem with that, of course, was it wasn't totally accurate, because they had some idea where the toilets were, but it wasn't very accurate. And when you need to pee, you're not worried about Apple Maps finding you the nearest Starbucks. When you need to pee, you have to have an accurate map. It has to know exactly where those toilets are and if they're open. You don't have second chances. So they sold this app, and but there were other things also that didn't really work. Another attempt was Clue, that actually I don't think ever came to market. It was the idea of, well, I'm not making this up, an Airbnb for toilets, which is basically that you'd tap into social networks and you'd know your friends and your friends of friends, and you'd all make your toilets available in case someone in the city of Toronto needed to go. It was the social toilet map. However, that didn't come to pass for obvious reasons. But this was the same idea, trying to get it out there. In the end, Sit or Squat was actually acquired by Charmin. And Charmin took away the pictures. They didn't take away the name, surprisingly. But still, if you look on the App Store, the problems of this app remain. There hasn't been much development in it. And in fact, you can't go anywhere but Australia and find an accurate toilet application, despite how obvious this idea is. And that's because the business model that's going to fund the accurate map to do this, it hasn't yet been found. Now, if I had to guess who would be willing to invest that money, it would be the map makers themselves. But if you go to Google Maps and put in public toilets for this location here, that's where you get Cannon, Toronto. I don't know why. And if you look there, it's a 36-minute drive away. And I'm not confident that you'll get to Cannon and you'll find a bathroom. If you put it into Siri, ask where the nearest public toilet is, no, not there. Couldn't find any public toilet. Because that data isn't part of those maps. So they haven't done it. This clear, pressing, and I said widespread but not significant need, hasn't been satisfied yet because no one's found the business model to fund what the public infrastructure could do. All right. So, I'll put that out there with the hope of spurring development here. But let me discuss something that has been perhaps more successful in finding a business model. And that is Instagram. Instagram had a core idea. It was, again on mobile devices, to allow you to take a picture easily, and take a good picture easily, and then obviously share it as well. It was one of the things in mobile devices coming up. Actually getting people to take good pictures was a hard thing, and filters were a great leveler for that. They weren't the first with that idea. Hipstamatic, among others, had a similar idea. Now, Hipstamatic preceded Instagram to the App Store by a number of months. Now, Hipstamatic was a paid app. It cost $4.99 effectively, and it was a huge success. It sold millions of copies of that. It wasn't quite as friendly to use as Instagram turned out to be, but it was basically the same idea, how to take better pictures on an iPhone for ordinary people to do so. You had the same idea, and you had these two firms produce very different business models. Hipstamatic paid, let's just sell it as a normal thing. Instagram, actually I don't know what their business model was, but they were giving it away for free. Okay? And if you asked anybody in 2010 to say who's going to make the most money out of this, it was not clear at all. Now, fast forward to today, and it's very, very clear. It's not even just a little bit of difference between these two. There's a huge amount of difference. Instagram is now the poster child for successful apps with $750 million because the business model it found was, turns out when you take pictures, you want to share them, and where do you do the most sharing? On Facebook. And so Facebook acquires Instagram. Why it paid that much is still partially a mystery, but nonetheless, you can't argue that it was an alternative business model and probably the right one for that idea. So step one in thinking about entrepreneurship, and if you have an entrepreneurial idea, is to recognize that you have a choice. The idea is different from the business model that would take it to market. Okay? Time and time again, you see ideas presented with their business model. I've seen Netflix for batteries, which is basically to subscribe to recycled batteries. That's combining an idea, recycled batteries, and getting them easily to people with a particular sort of business model, and it's wedding you to that. Because the business model really matters as to whether an idea gets out there, you can't just rely on that. So you have to recognize you have a choice. Let me give you just another example closer to home in the University of Toronto here. Blackboard is the learning management system of the University of Toronto. Most of you who are students have used it here, and you probably love it as much as professors do. It was developed many, many years ago. Web technologies involved, things have evolved since then, and undergraduates like yourselves, like many of you here, had the idea that, why are we organizing course management like portals, like syllabus sheets or something like that? Surely the main thing we want in a course management system, and front and center, is the activity stream. The thing that allows students to interact with each other and professors. And students were in fact inventing this already on Facebook themselves. They were keeping the professors out because they didn't want to see what they were doing, but nonetheless, they were doing it. So one group of Wharton undergraduates founded what came to be known as LAW, which is a very, very social network type learning management system, dead easy to use. Very easy for professors to know what to do with it. You don't need a day of training. Believe it or not, you do need that for Blackboard. You don't need this for this. And it was all centered around the activity stream with all the other course materials feeding into it. They had the idea that they were going to give that away. There was going to be a free thing and they'd work out how to make money off it later on. At the same time, too, University of Toronto computer science students who have graduated now, Hardy and Marwan Aladdin, they're actually serial entrepreneurs. They've been entrepreneurs since they were 11. And they've had, this is like their third venture or something, founded CoursePeer. Again, the same idea, to center a learning management system around the activity stream, the news feed that was coming in. Well, basically, CoursePeer opted for a different strategy. They recognized that all the information generated from that feed were telling something about students' collaboration, their softer skills, if you will, and employers would be interested in that. University of Toronto Engineering School has been extremely interested in that and has been rolling this out. But CourseFear was able to experiment because it was looking to actually sell this thing and has now found that corporate education is very, very interested in this. And those experiments are continuing. So step 2 is to experiment with alternative business models and allow yourself to do that. Which of course leads to step 3, is that those experiments aren't free. Experimenting isn't free. If you sell something for free because you want to disrupt something, it's very hard to raise price later on. It might be a good business model for some circumstances, as Instagram has shown, but you can't just raise price later on. It isn't free. If you want to make a big splash as your business model, you've got a problem is you might attract attention from competitors. So that wouldn't be free. If you want to include a lot of people in your business plan, you risk losing control of the idea. It might not be free then. So to give you one final example of those costs, this Kira Talent is a venture that came out of the Next 36 program here in Canada that I have a bit of involvement with. That selects the 36 top undergraduates who are interested in entrepreneurship every year and literally puts them into ventures and funds them and teaches them some economics and business along the way to see them come to successful. Kira Talent was one of the ones from last year, and what they had the idea of was changing how we recruit people for employment, replacing face-to-face interviews with a video interview. An employer sends a set of questions to you, you sit in front of a webcam, you answer those questions, shoot it back to them, you don't have to come in, it saves them time, it saves you time, it's a better screening device. Now, their initial idea was they're going to get the people who are being hired to pay for services that will make the web videos look prettier. Okay? Well, it turned out people didn't want to pay for that, so they switched their business model towards charging the recruiters. But how do they find their customers? Well, one of them, they made the interesting decision of asking me what I thought. How in my business would I, use this? And I was thinking, what are you, crazy? This is some stock standard undergraduate question. Why are you here asking me, a professor, how this would work in my business? I'm not in a business. All we ever do is get students into the program and we have to think about who's the best students to. I did wrong. Maybe we could use this to recruit and to interview MBA students, not just for recruiting. And that Rotman became Kira's first customer. And now they've been rolling out with business schools to help in those recruiting process, which of course advertises to other firms as well. And that's through experimenting in different ways and recognizing that you can change your business model by keeping your core idea. So one idea has many business models. You have to recognize you have a choice. You have to experiment with different business models, and you have to pay attention that experimenting isn't free. So it's something you have to prioritize and think about. It's costly, but that's what makes it valuable.